I still remember the quiet of that morning, the kind of quiet that does not feel peaceful, the kind that makes your heart feel empty, like someone gently removed a part of your soul during the night, and you only realized it when you opened your eyes. It was the day of my husband's funeral. I had woken up earlier than anyone else in the house. The sky was still gray, and the air had that soft chill that usually comes before sunrise. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, touching the blanket on his side. It was cold, too cold, and yet I kept my hand there, as if maybe the warmth would come back for just a second. I whispered his name under my breath, not because I expected an answer, but because it felt wrong to start a day like this in silence. I moved slowly that morning. Every small act felt heavy. Folding the black shawl, washing my face, looking at myself in the mirror and not recognizing the woman staring back. There are days when life gives you warnings, little signs that something is about to change, something is about to fall apart. But this day gave no warning. Just an empty house, a quiet hallway, and the sound of my own breathing. I walked to the kitchen and made tea, mostly out of habit. The cup felt warm in my hands, but inside I felt frozen. I was trying not to cry. I had cried enough the night before. I had cried so much that even the tears felt tired. I kept telling myself, just get through today. Just this one day. But deep down, I knew this day would stay with me forever. As I sat at the table, my hands wrapped around the cup, my phone, which I had placed on the counter, suddenly began to ring. The sound made me jump. Who calls a widow on the morning of her husband's funeral? For a moment, I felt irritated, then confused, then strangely afraid. Calls like this only come when something is wrong, and something was already so very wrong. I stood up and walked slowly toward the phone. The name on the screen made me stop for a second. It was my husband's boss, a man who hardly ever called me, a man who spoke to me with polite formality whenever we met, a man who had sent a short text the night my husband passed, saying he was sorry for the loss. Why would he be calling now? I felt a strange pressure in my chest as I picked up the phone. My hand was trembling. I pressed the green button and tried to steady my voice. "Hello?" I said softly.
There was a moment of silence on the other side. Not the kind of silence that comes when someone is choosing their words, but the kind that comes when someone is completely unsure of how to say what they need to say. Then he spoke my name, quietly, almost apologetically, and then he said something that I did not expect on a day like this. "Please, can you talk for a moment?" he asked. I looked around the empty kitchen as if someone might tell me what to do. Today, of all days, why would I talk to him? But something in his voice made me stay on the line. Something nervous, something heavy. "Yes," I whispered. Again, a pause, a long one. Then he took a slow breath and said the words that still echo inside me. "You need to see something. I found a secret your husband left behind." My heart stopped. Or at least, it felt like it did. A secret? My husband? The man I lived with for so many years? The man I trusted more than anyone? I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. What kind of secret?" I asked. His boss didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said something that chilled me more than the morning air ever could. "I can't explain it to you on the phone," he said. "You need to see it with your own eyes." My breath caught. "But today is the funeral," I said weakly, almost like a reminder, as if he might have forgotten. "Yes," he replied softly. "I know. I'm sorry, but this can't wait." His voice cracked when he said it. That scared me more than anything else. I felt my legs weaken, so I sat down in the nearest chair. The wood felt cold under me. What did he hide from me? I asked again, barely audible. This time he whispered, "It's about his last day at work and something he left behind for you." My chest tightened. I felt the tears slip down my cheek, not because of the funeral, but because now I had a new fear, a second grief layered under the first one. When someone you love dies, you think the worst has already happened. You think nothing can hurt more than losing them. But that phone call proved me wrong, because now there was a question growing inside me, sharp and unsettling. Who was my husband really? I wiped my face and tried to breathe normally. "Can you tell me anything?" I asked quietly. Just something that can help me understand?" His boss hesitated. Then he said, "I promise you, it's important, and it will change everything you think you know." My hands went cold. Change? Everything? Those words felt heavier than the grief in my chest. "I will come after the funeral," I whispered. "No," he said gently. "Please come before." My breath caught. "Before?" I repeated. "Yes," he said. "You need to know this before you say goodbye to him."
The world around me suddenly felt blurry, like the walls were moving farther away, like I was falling into something dark and deep. I felt my fingers tightening around the phone. "I don't know if I can do that," I whispered. He sighed, and for the first time, I sensed he was holding back tears. "I wouldn't ask you," he said softly, "if it wasn't necessary." For a long moment, neither of us said anything. I could hear only the soft hum of the refrigerator, the gentle tapping of a raindrop on the window, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Finally, I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Okay," I whispered. "I will come." He thanked me quietly, then ended the call. I sat there in the kitchen, the phone resting in my palm, the tea turning cold on the table. Outside, the sky began to lighten, but inside me, the world grew darker. Because now something new had entered my grief. Something sharp, something confusing, something frightening. A secret. A secret that waited for me somewhere outside this house. A secret left by the man I loved, on the day I was supposed to bury him. And as I sat there staring at the silent phone, I felt a thought rising inside me, slow, heavy, and painful. What if I never really knew the man I married? The house felt strangely quiet after the call ended, almost as if the walls themselves had heard everything and were now holding their breath with me. I sat still for a few minutes, trying to collect myself, but my mind kept spinning in circles. A secret. My husband. His last day at work. These words kept echoing inside me like footsteps in an empty hall. I finally stood up and walked toward the living room. The morning light was beginning to seep through the curtains, soft and pale. It cast long shadows across the floor, stretching all the way to the sofa where my husband used to sit every evening. I paused, staring at that spot. He had a habit of leaning back slightly, resting one arm over the top of the sofa and calling me over with a small smile. A quiet smile. The kind of smile that made me feel seen and safe. I walked slowly toward the sofa and touched the fabric. It still held a faint smell of him. Not strong, just enough that my heart ached all over again. I closed my eyes and whispered, "What did you hide from me?" The house didn't answer. It never would. But somehow, today, I needed it to. I decided to get ready. Not for the funeral yet, for the unexpected meeting that now waited for me. My hands moved automatically as I laid my clothes on the bed, a simple black sari, nothing too decorative. He never liked me wearing anything too heavy when I was sad. He would say, "Comfort first. Everything else can wait." I smiled weakly at the memory. As I dressed, I thought back to the beginning of our life together, not because I wanted to distract myself, but because I needed to remind my heart of something solid, something true. We met when we were both young, not in the dramatic way movies show, but in the gentle, ordinary way life brings two people together. He worked in a small company back then, long before he became more stable. I worked part-time at a library, arranging books and helping children find their storybooks. He used to come to the library sometimes to read newspapers. Not because he didn't have access to news at work. He said the library felt peaceful. He liked the smell of books, the silence, the way the sunlight fell on the wooden tables. The first time he spoke to me, I remember thinking his voice sounded like he had been carrying a lot inside him. Quiet, steady, and warm, but with a tiredness behind it. We talked more after that, slowly, gently. He told me about his childhood, about his mother who raised him alone after his father left, about his dreams to build a stable future, about how he wanted a small family, nothing grand, just a simple life filled with love. I told him about my love for stories, for quiet evenings, for the feeling of coming home after a long day and being welcomed by someone who truly cares. Years later, when we finally married, it felt natural, like breathing, like stepping into a home I already knew. He was never the loud type, never dramatic, never the kind of man who made big gestures or flashy declarations. But he was kind, so kind that sometimes I worried the world would hurt him. And now he was gone, and now I was left with a secret he never told me. As I finished getting dressed, I felt a slight trembling in my legs. Grief has a way of making even simple movements feel heavy. In the hallway, I saw the framed photograph of us on our wedding day. He was smiling, not widely, but softly. The same gentle smile he always had. I reached out and touched the glass, feeling a chill under my fingers. "I trusted you," I whispered. My voice cracked. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't anger. It was a quiet reminder to myself of what we had, of what I still believed in, even with the fear of this unknown truth waiting for me. I made my way to the living room again. My sister-in-law was sleeping lightly on the other couch. She had stayed overnight because she didn't want me to wake up alone on the funeral day. Her presence was comforting, but at that moment, I felt the need to breathe away from everyone. I stepped outside for a moment. The early morning air wrapped around me like cool silk. The sky was slowly lightening, turning from deep gray to pale blue. Our neighborhood was still and quiet. No cars, no voices, just the soft sound of a breeze brushing through the trees. I stood on the front step and took a long breath. I needed strength for everything ahead. The funeral, the relatives, the rituals, and now, the secret. The boss's voice replayed in my mind, full of hesitation and urgency. "It will change everything you think you know." I tried to understand what that meant. Did my husband struggle with something he hid from me? Did he try to protect me from something? Or was it something painful? Something that might break my heart in a different way? Yet even with fear swirling inside me, there was a strange calm too. Because deep down, I believed this. Whatever the truth was, he must have had a reason. Around 7 in the morning, people began to wake up inside the house. Soft footsteps, the sound of doors opening, quiet murmurs. The funeral rituals would begin soon. But I had a meeting to attend before any of that. I returned inside and gently shook my sister-in-law awake. She opened her eyes slowly and looked at me, her expression softening with concern. "Did you sleep at all?" she whispered. "Not much," I said. She sat up and touched my hand. "Today will be hard. she said softly. "We're all here for you." I nodded, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. "I have to step out for a while," I said quietly. Her eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Now? Where are you going?" I hesitated. I didn't want to spill anything until I knew the truth myself. "His office," I said softly. "Why?" Her voice carried both confusion and worry. I forced a calm smile. "His boss needs to give me something important." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly, though the concern in her eyes didn't fade. "Go," she said gently. "I'll handle things here until you return." I thanked her softly and walked toward the door. The walk to my husband's office wasn't long, but today, each step felt like I was moving through heavy fog. My mind kept drifting to different memories, small moments that suddenly felt sharper. Him bringing home flowers on days when I felt low. Him laughing quietly at a joke I made. Him sitting at the dining table late at night, staring at papers I never read. Those papers. I always assumed they were worksheets or project files. He never hid them, but he never showed them either. Sometimes I would walk past and ask, "Everything okay?" And he would always nod and say, "Just work." But now I wondered, was it really just work? I walked faster, trying to push away my fears. When I reached the office building, the sun was finally beginning to rise fully. The glass windows reflected the golden light, but the sight felt cold to me, too formal, too distant. The security guard recognized me instantly. He gave me a sad nod and opened the gate without asking anything. Inside, the office reception was empty. The usual buzzing energy was replaced by a quiet stillness. His boss's cabin was at the end of the hallway, a place I had only visited twice before, once on our anniversary when I came to surprise my husband with lunch, and once during the Diwali celebration organized by the company. As I walked down the hallway, I felt memories flicker like small flames. I remembered my husband walking beside me here. I remembered him chatting with his coworkers. I remembered his soft laughter in this very corridor. And now, I was walking here alone. I reached the cabin and saw the door slightly open. I knocked gently. "Come in," a voice said. I stepped inside. His boss was standing near the window, looking out. When he turned toward me, the sadness on his face hit me like a wave. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, as if the last few days had drained him too. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." I sat slowly. My hands trembled slightly, so I folded them in my lap. He took a deep breath, walked to his desk, and picked up a small folder. A plain brown folder with my husband's name written on the front. My heart tightened. "This," he said softly, "was found in his drawer the evening he passed." I stared at the folder. It felt like it held a part of him, maybe a part of his last thoughts. His boss looked at me with eyes full of conflict. "I didn't know whether to give this to you immediately or wait, but when I opened it, I realized you needed to know." He walked closer and placed the folder on the table between us. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing the edge of the paper. It felt warm from his hands. "What is in it?" I whispered. He hesitated. Then he sat down and looked directly into my eyes. It's about a project he was working on, but it's also more personal. My breath caught. Personal? I asked quietly. He nodded. There were things he didn't tell anyone, not even me. But the day he died, he tried to finish something important, something meant for you. I felt tears gather in my eyes again. For me? I breathed. Yes, he said. Everything in this folder is connected to you. I stared at the folder, unable to move for a moment. It was strange how something so small could feel so heavy. After a long silence, his boss leaned back in his chair and said, "Before you open it, I need to tell you everything I know." His voice softened. His gaze grew distant. And it begins with the last conversation I had with your husband. With those words, something shifted inside me. A new fear, a new sorrow, and a new sense of closeness to the man I had lost. I took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready," I whispered, even though I wasn't sure I truly was.
His boss took a slow breath before he began speaking, as if he needed to steady himself. He looked tired, more tired than I had ever seen him. The kind of tiredness that comes not just from work, but from carrying something heavy inside for too long. "I remember that day very clearly," he said quietly. "The last day your husband came to office." He paused and looked toward the window. The morning sun was fully up now, casting soft lines of light across the room, but his face remained shadowed, as if the story lived in a darker place. "He looked different," the boss said gently. "Not sick, not weak, just distant, like he was lost in thought." I felt a cold shiver run through me. My husband often kept his feelings inside, but I always sensed when something troubled him. And yet, in the last few weeks before he passed, I had been so busy with family responsibilities, household things, small routines. I didn't notice anything unusual. Or maybe I didn't want to notice. His boss continued. He came into my office early that morning, earlier than usual. He didn't even say good morning like he always did. He just sat down quietly. I forced myself to breathe slowly. I imagined him sitting in this very room, on this very chair. My heart tightened. I asked him if everything was okay, the boss said, and he smiled, but not his usual smile. It was forced, heavy, a forced smile. Yes, I knew that smile. He used it on days when he was trying to protect me from something he didn't want me to worry about. And then, his boss said, he placed a file on my desk, a file I had never seen before. My eyes moved to the folder in front of me, the same one he had placed on the table. He told me he needed to finish something important, the boss said softly. Something he had been working on in secret. In secret? I whispered. He nodded. I asked him what it was, but he didn't tell me. He just said, "I need a few hours. Please don't let anyone disturb me." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to absorb everything. My husband, the man who shared everything with me, had been working on something I didn't even know existed. He wasn't himself, the boss said. I could see he was carrying some weight, but he worked with focus, intense focus, as if he was racing against time. My fingers trembled slightly. And then, the boss added quietly, around noon he came out of his cabin. He looked pale, more than I had ever seen him. He told me he needed to go home early. My breath caught. He didn't come home early that day. He never reached home.
But before he left, the boss continued, he gave me this folder. He told me to keep it safe. And he said, the boss hesitated, swallowing hard, if anything happens to me, give this to her. My heart stopped for a moment. He knew. He must have known something was wrong. He must have felt something. I felt tears well up as I whispered, he said that? His boss nodded. Those were his last words to me. A silence filled the room, heavy, trembling, painful. And after he left, the boss continued slowly, he collapsed outside the building. The security guard saw him fall. My hand flew to my mouth. He survived long enough to reach the hospital, the boss said softly, but not long enough to speak to anyone. The room suddenly felt colder. My arms shook slightly. I remembered the call from the hospital, the rush, the panic, the disbelief, the numbness. But now, hearing this, knowing he had something unfinished, something meant for me, it added a new layer to the grief. The boss leaned back in his chair, his voice soft and steady. I didn't know what was inside the folder, not until last night. I didn't want to look at first. It felt personal. But then I realized, you needed answers. He gently pushed the folder toward me. He said he read everything, and he believed your husband was trying to tell you something important, something he didn't have the courage or time to say. My eyes stayed fixed on the folder. It felt like a living thing now, breathing, waiting, pulsating with meaning. I don't know how you will feel after reading it, the boss said softly, but I know one thing. He cared for you more than anything. I closed my eyes and let a tear slip down my cheek. I believed that. I always believed that. But a secret? A hidden project? A last message? What could it be? For a long moment, I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind felt heavy, my throat tight. The boss watched me quietly. You don't have to open it here, he said gently. You can take your time. But, please, read it before the funeral. I think he wanted that. I nodded slowly, unable to form words. I carefully picked up the folder. It felt light in my hands, too light for something that carried so much weight. The paper underneath my fingers felt slightly rough. I felt fear, curiosity, pain, all mixed together. As I stood up, the boss walked around the table and placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. I know this is hard, he said softly. I wish he had told you himself. I wish things had gone differently. I nodded again, my eyes filling with fresh tears. Thank you, I whispered. He nodded, his expression full of empathy and regret. If you need anything, he said, you can call me any time. I whispered a soft thank you and turned to leave. Walking out of the office felt surreal. The hallways seemed longer. The lights seemed dimmer. The air felt heavier. I clutched the folder close to my chest as if it were a piece of him, the last piece. Every step echoed softly on the floor. The sound felt like a heartbeat. Outside, the sun was shining, but the world felt dim around me. I paused near the entrance and let the breeze touch my face. My eyes closed, and for a moment, I felt overwhelmed by everything at once. His last day, his strange behavior, his secret file, his last message. There were so many questions, and I was afraid of the answers. What if this secret changed the way I saw him? What if it hurt more than losing him did? What if it revealed a side of him I never knew? Or, what if it explained everything? What if it brought clarity? What if it was something he wanted me to understand before letting him go? I took a slow breath. I needed to know. I didn't go home immediately. I needed a quiet place, somewhere I could open the folder without interruptions or curious eyes. So I walked to the small park 2 streets away from the office. It was a peaceful place. A few benches, tall trees, a patch of green grass, and a fountain at the center that made a soft, gentle sound. I chose a bench under a tree, where the sunlight fell in broken patterns through the leaves. I placed the folder on my lap. My hands trembled as I touched the edges. For a moment, I was scared to open it. Once I opened it, there would be no turning back. The truth would become real. I closed my eyes and whispered a soft prayer, not to get strength, but to remain calm, whatever I found inside. Then I gently opened the folder. Inside, there were several sheets of paper, some typed, some handwritten, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. And his handwriting, the same neat, gentle writing I had seen on birthday cards, grocery lists, and notes he left on the fridge. My breath broke. His handwriting, his final words, something he prepared for me. My fingers brushed the envelope like it was something sacred. But before opening it, I forced myself to look at the other papers. The first page was a typed report, a project summary, but the title made my heart jump. Medical Research, Confidential Case Study. Medical? My husband didn't work in medicine. He worked in data analysis.
I flipped to the next page. Another document, another medical term, another chart showing some kind of progression. My heart began to pound. I turned to the handwritten pages. His handwriting, soft, steady, familiar. The first line made my breath freeze. If you are reading this, something has happened to me, and I couldn't tell you in time. My vision blurred with tears. Another line. I hid this from you because I didn't want you to worry. I wiped my cheeks and read on. 6 months ago, I found out I had a serious medical condition. Something rare. No. 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 My hands shook violently now. I didn't want to burden you. I didn't want you to live in fear every day. I covered my mouth as a sob slipped out. My husband, my gentle, quiet husband, he didn't hide a betrayal. He hid his suffering. He hid his illness. He didn't tell me because he wanted to protect me. He didn't tell me because he wanted me to smile, to sleep, to live without fear. I read more, my tears falling on the pages. I wrote you a letter. Please read it last. I looked at the sealed envelope again. His name, my name, our last connection. I cried silently under the tree, the papers shaking in my hands, the sunlight falling on them like a final blessing. My husband didn't cheat. He didn't betray. He didn't hide anything selfish. He hid his pain so I wouldn't suffer. He lived his final months with a secret weight and carried it alone to protect me. A wave of guilt washed over me. Why didn't I see his pain? Why didn't I notice he was struggling? Why didn't I push him when he said just work? Why didn't I understand? But then another thought settled softly in my heart. Because he didn't want me to. Because he wanted me to remember him smiling, not suffering. I wiped my tears again and held the envelope gently. The park felt quiet. The world felt still. And for the first time that day, I felt something new growing inside me. Not just grief, but longing. Longing to hear his voice again. Longing to read his final words. Longing to understand everything he wanted to tell me. I held the envelope close to my heart and whispered, I'm ready, even though it still hurt. The envelope lay across my palms like something fragile, something sacred. It felt warm under the sunlight, yet my fingers trembled as if I were holding winter itself. I sat still for a long time, listening to the soft sound of the fountain behind me. The gentle splash of water broke the silence in small ripples, a calming sound that felt almost like someone whispering, "Breathe slowly."
Take your time." The trees around me rustled softly in the morning breeze. A few birds flew overhead. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the far end of the park. Life continued all around me, unaware that my world had shifted completely. I wiped my cheeks again, though more tears kept coming. Then, with slow, careful fingers, I broke the seal of the envelope. Inside, there was a folded letter. His handwriting filled the page. Neat, soft, familiar. Seeing it made my heart twist. It felt like he was speaking across time, from his last moments to my trembling hands. I took a deep breath and unfolded the letter. The first line made my vision blur immediately. "My dear, if you are reading this, I'm sorry." The simplicity of the words hurt more than anything elaborate ever could. I wanted to tell you many times. I wanted to sit with you, hold your hand, and explain everything. But every time I tried, I saw your smile, and I couldn't break it. I didn't hide this because I didn't trust you. I hid it because I love you too much. The tears fell faster now. 6 months ago, I started feeling very tired. I thought it was work stress. I thought it was normal. But when it got worse, I went for tests. My breath caught. I kept reading slowly, each line heavier than the one before. The doctors found something serious, something rare, something that would not get better. I felt my fingers tighten around the paper. He suggested treatment, and I tried. I really did. But it didn't work the way they hoped, and I didn't want to burden you with hospital visits and fear. I whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" As if he could answer. Every time I looked at you, I saw your strength, but I also saw your tenderness. I knew if you learned the truth, you would worry day and night. You would stop sleeping. You would stop laughing. Those words stabbed me deeply because I knew they were true. I'd always been the one to worry too much, to love too much, to feel too deeply.
He knew that. He knew me better than anyone. I wanted to protect your heart. I wanted your memories of me to be peaceful, not filled with pain. A quiet sob escaped me. I kept working because I wanted to leave something behind for you, something that might help, something that might bring peace. I looked at the other papers in the folder, the medical notes, the charts, the documents. His last project, his last effort, his last love. But the letter continued. In the last few weeks, my body felt weaker. I knew time was running out. So I wrote this letter for you. I put my heart into every word. The sunlight flickered through the leaves, falling on the paper like soft blessings. Please don't blame yourself. Please don't think you could have saved me. No one could. My tears fell onto the page, smudging the corner slightly. The only thing I want from you now is this. Live. Please, live. I covered my mouth as another sob slipped out. Don't spend your days in regret. Don't hide yourself away in grief. Don't let my absence take away your future. It felt like he was holding my face gently, speaking to me the way he did when I was upset. Your life is big, beautiful, kind. Don't shrink it because of me. I pressed the letter against my chest. I loved you. Every day, every quiet moment, every simple meal we shared, every walk, every smile, every silence. My heart felt like it was breaking open and healing at the same time. And I will love you in every memory you keep of me. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. Thank you for giving me a beautiful life. Even at the end, when things were difficult, I was happy because I had you. Another tear fell. Be strong, my love.
Be gentle with yourself. And when you smile, think of me. The final line broke me completely. I am always with you. Not in body, but in the love we shared. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried silently under the tree. The world around me blurred. The fountain's sound faded. The breeze felt like a soft hand brushing my cheek. Time lost meaning. I don't know how long I sat there, minutes, maybe hours, but when I finally lifted my head, the sun was brighter, the air warmer, and my heart heavier yet strangely clearer. I placed the letter carefully back into the envelope and held it close. His last words, his last love, his last truth. All of it for me. Slowly, I picked up the other papers from the folder. The medical documents, the reports, the notes. Each page told a painful story. He had worked on understanding his own illness. He had analyzed patterns. He had collected information. He had tried to make sense of everything happening inside his body. And then, I reached a handwritten page I had missed earlier. At the top, he had written, "Explanation for her." For me. I began reading. I know you will blame yourself. You will think you should have seen the signs. But I hid them. I hid them well.
I wiped my cheeks again. I didn't want you to notice. I tried to appear normal. I smiled even when it hurt. I worked late so you wouldn't see me in pain. My chest tightened. On days when I came home tired and quiet, it wasn't you. It was my body. I remembered those days, days when he seemed distant, days when I thought he was stressed from work, days when I asked, "Are you okay?" And he smiled and said, "Just tired." He was suffering, and I didn't know. But then again, he didn't want me to know. The next lines were even heavier. I couldn't tell you, because I knew the moment you heard the diagnosis, your eyes would change. Your smile would disappear. You would count my breaths instead of living yours. A painful truth. So I chose silence. Not because I wanted to leave you alone, but because I wanted to leave you peace. Peace. He wanted peace for me, even at the cost of his own comfort. The final handwritten line said, "Please don't be angry at me. I loved you in the only way I knew." I closed the page gently. The sun had shifted behind the tree, casting a warm glow across the grass. But inside me, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Grief, love, guilt, understanding, longing, relief, pain, peace, all of them tangled together. I leaned back against the bench and looked up at the sky. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered into the quiet air. The wind rustled through the leaves overhead, almost as if answering softly. Because he loved you. Because he didn't want you to suffer. Because he carried the burden alone. I placed the envelope back into the folder carefully, as if tucking a sleeping child into bed. Then I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but something inside me felt stronger, clearer. I looked around the park, the fountain, the trees, the sunlight, and realized something. This moment was my turning point. Not the letter, not the secret, not the truth, but the understanding that came with it. His silence was not a betrayal. It was love in its quietest form. A painful, protective love. A love that wanted to shield me from fear. And now that I knew the truth, I had a choice. I could let the secret break me, or I could let it close the wounds I carried in my heart.
I glanced at the sky again. I forgive you, I whispered softly. I understand.
The wind brushed my cheek again, gentle, warm, almost like a touch, almost like him. When I left the park, the folder clutched close to my chest. The world felt different. Not lighter, but clearer. Every step I took felt meaningful, as if each step was carrying me towards something new. A truth, a closure, a deeper acceptance. When I reached home, the house was full. Relatives had arrived. Voices filled the living room. Soft murmurs, occasional sobs, familiar faces filled with sympathy. My sister-in-law rushed to me. She touched my arm gently. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I looked at her worried eyes, her tired face, and for the first time that day, I felt a small sense of calm. "I'm okay," I said quietly. It was not a lie. It was not complete truth. It was a beginning. She nodded slowly and guided me inside. But before stepping into the room where his body lay, I paused. I placed my hand on the folder, still holding it close to my heart. "I know now," I whispered in my mind. "I understand why you hid it. And I'm not angry. And I'm not broken. You did what you thought was right." A new strength settled inside me. Soft, quiet, but steady. And I knew I was ready. Ready to face the funeral. Ready to say goodbye. Ready to carry his truth with grace. Slowly, I walked inside. The turning point wasn't the discovery. It wasn't the letter. It wasn't the secrets. The turning point was the realization. He never left me alone. He carried me in his thoughts until his very last breath. And now, I would carry his love in mine. The house felt quieter when I walked in, even though it was filled with people. Maybe it was because my heart had grown calmer after reading the letter. Maybe it was because the weight of confusion had finally shifted into something softer, something I could carry without breaking. My footsteps felt steady as I moved through the hallway. The air smelled faintly of incense and flowers. A soft murmuring of voices drifted from the living room. Chairs scraped gently against the floor. Someone whispered a prayer. And then I saw him, my husband, lying peacefully, as if he were simply resting after a long day. His face soft, his expression gentle, as if he still carried that kindness he always showed me when he came home from work. For a moment, my breath caught. I walked toward him slowly, each step echoing faintly in my ears. My sister-in-law placed her hand on my shoulder gently, as if asking silently, "Are you sure?" I nodded. I knelt beside him. I touched his hand lightly. Cold. Still. But in my heart, it felt warm with 1,000 memories. And then, softly, quietly, I whispered, "I read your letter." The world around me fell silent, even though people were still moving, still whispering, still mourning. Only he and I existed in that moment. "I understand now," I murmured. "You were trying to save me from pain." My fingers brushed the edge of the shawl covering him. "My love, you carried everything alone." A tear fell, but it was a different kind of tear. Not from confusion, not from anger, not from unanswered questions. It was a tear of understanding, a tear of closeness, a tear of quiet acceptance. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. "I forgive you," I whispered softly, "and I thank you."
The hours that followed moved slowly, wrapped in a soft haze of rituals, condolences, and memories. Relatives sat around the room in small circles, some telling stories of him, some crying quietly, some offering food I couldn't eat, some holding my hand in passing. I listened. I nodded. Sometimes I smiled faintly at a memory someone shared. But mostly I sat with the folder in my lap, feeling its gentle weight and the truth it carried. At one point, my mother came and sat beside me. She touched my arm softly. "You disappeared earlier," she said in a low voice, with concern in her eyes. "I was looking for you." I turned to her slowly. "I went to the park," I said simply. "I needed some air." Her eyes softened. She held my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "If it becomes too heavy, lean on us." I nodded. But deep in my heart, I felt a different kind of strength growing. A strength I didn't know I still had. Not the strength of pretending everything was fine. Not the force of forcing myself to keep busy. It was a softer strength. A quieter one. The kind that comes from understanding someone's final truth. When the time came to move for the final rites, everyone stood slowly. The living room filled with movement and soft steps. Hands reached out to help. Shoulders brushed past one another. The sound of the priest's calm voice filled the air. I stood at the edge of the room, holding the folder close to my chest. And suddenly, his boss, the man who had called me on the morning of the funeral, approached me quietly. He looked weary, as if carrying a heavy sadness of his own. "May I speak with you for a moment?" he asked softly. I nodded. We stepped a little to the side, away from the cluster of relatives. He waited for a moment, gathering his words, and then he said gently, he was trying to finish that project because he hoped it would help medical researchers. He said, "If not for me, maybe for someone else." I felt my heart tighten. "He was brave," the boss continued, in a low voice. "He worked on days when he could barely stand. He refused to take leave. Not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because he wanted to leave something meaningful behind." Tears filled my eyes again, but they didn't spill. I clasped the folder more tightly. "He did." I whispered, "He left me this." The boss nodded gently. "He loved you a lot," he said. "He spoke about you every day, in meetings, during breaks, when he was tired, when he was in pain. Always." My heart softened further. "He was a good man," I whispered. "One of the best," the boss replied. After the rites were completed and everyone returned to the house, the sky had begun to darken. A deep orange glow spread across the horizon, a quiet sunset that looked like someone slowly closing their eyes after a long day. People started leaving. Soft goodbyes, gentle hugs, warm hands on my shoulder, polite words of sympathy. Soon, only a small circle of close family remained. My mother insisted I eat something. I sat at the dining table and took a few small bites of rice and dal, not because I was hungry, but because she looked so worried. As I sat there, I looked around the house. Every corner reminded me of him. The empty chair where he used to read the newspaper, the shoes near the door he never remembered to arrange properly, the small plant he watered every morning, the coffee mug he always forgot in the living room. His presence was everywhere. Some might say that would hurt, but in that moment, it felt comforting. Like he hadn't really gone. Like he was just in another room. When I finished eating, I stood up and walked to our bedroom. The air felt still. the room felt gentle, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath in respect. His shirt was still hanging on the chair. His watch lay on the bedside table. His pillow still held the faint shape of his head. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the folder again. The letter, the medical notes, the project documents, his handwriting, his diagrams, his final thoughts, his final love. As I went through the pages once more, I noticed something at the bottom of the folder. A small envelope I hadn't seen before. My breath caught. It was addressed to me, in his handwriting, but smaller, almost like a whisper. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, and only one line written on it. I'm sorry for the pain this will cause you, but I hope one day you will remember me with more smiles than tears. A soft, broken sound escaped my lips, something between a laugh and a sob, because in that moment, I realized something very deep. He wasn't asking me to forget him. He wasn't asking me to move on quickly. He wasn't asking me to erase the memories. He was asking me to remember him gently, not with regret, not with guilt, not with anger at his silence, but with warmth, with appreciation, with the quiet love we always shared.
That night, after everyone had gone home and the house fell silent, I sat near the window and watched the moon slowly rise. The air outside was cool. The trees swayed softly. A dog barked faintly in the distance. The world felt calm again. I looked at the moon's pale glow and whispered, I know now. I understand why you hid it. I know you didn't want to see me hurt. I know you tried your best. My voice trembled, but it didn't break. And I promise. I placed my hand gently over my heart. I will try to live. Not because you asked, but because you deserve to be remembered with joy, not sadness. The moonlight fell across my face, soft and silver. I closed my eyes. For the first time since his passing, I felt a sense of peace settling into my chest. Not complete peace, not final peace, but something like a beginning. A seed of acceptance. A small light in the darkness. A quiet understanding. And I realized this was the resolution. Not the end of grief, not the disappearance of pain, but the slow transformation of sorrow into love, the slow shift of confusion into clarity, the gentle movement of heartbreak toward healing. A soft voice inside me whispered, You will be okay. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. And I believed it. For the first time, I believed it. The days that followed moved slowly, like pages turning in an old book. Some days felt heavy, like walking through rain. Others felt lighter, like sunlight resting softly on my shoulder. But each day brought a tiny shift inside me, a soft settling of feelings, a quieter kind of grief, a gentler understanding of everything that had happened. I carried his letter with me everywhere for the first week. Sometimes I would read a single line. Sometimes I would just hold it close to my heart without opening it. It felt like a voice in my pocket, a hand on my shoulder, a reminder that love does not disappear just because a body does. Gradually, the house began to feel different. Not empty, not abandoned, just still. His clothes hung quietly in the wardrobe. His books remained in their places. His watch remained on the bedside table. But instead of making me cry, they began to make me smile gently, as if each small thing whispered, He lived here. He loved here. One morning, about 2 weeks later,
I found myself sitting at the dining table with a cup of tea. Not because I felt hungry, not because I wanted to distract myself, but because my body simply led me there. The morning sunlight entered through the window, falling across the table in a warm stripe. Dust particles floated slowly in the air, moving with the rhythm of the breeze. I looked at the empty chair across from me, the chair he used to sit in while reading the morning news. For the first time since he passed, I whispered softly, "Good morning." A tear slipped out, but my lips curved into a faint smile. It felt right. It felt peaceful. Not like a goodbye, but like a gentle continuation. Later that afternoon, I went to the park again. The same bench, the same fountain, the same rustle of trees. This time, I didn't clutch the folder tightly. I carried only the letter, folded neatly in my bag. Children were playing nearby. A dog ran across the grass. An elderly couple walked hand in hand past me. Life. Simple. Ordinary. Moving forward. I closed my eyes and listened to the fountain, the water falling in soft, steady rhythms. And in that moment, I felt something calm settle deep inside me. Not joy, not pain, just a quiet acceptance, a gentle understanding that life doesn't break permanently. It bends, it shifts, it rearranges itself around our losses, but it goes on. And so do we. When I returned home, I opened the windows to let the fresh air in. The curtains fluttered softly. The sunlight spread across the floor. The house felt warm, not heavy. I walked into the bedroom and opened the wardrobe. I touched his shirts, one by one, not to pack them away, not to donate them, not to erase his presence, but simply to feel connected. When I reached the blue shirt he loved most, I pressed my fingers to the fabric and whispered, "I'm living just like you wanted." And in that small moment, I felt proud. Not because I was strong, not because I had moved on, but because I had taken one gentle step toward life, one small breath at a time. The following Sunday, I lit a candle near his photograph. I placed his favorite flower beside it, a white lily. The flame flickered softly, casting a warm glow across his smiling face. I sat there for a long time, remembering simple things. His laugh, his quiet habits, the way he held my hand when crossing the street, his soft goodbyes when he left for work, the way he always said, "Take care," even if I was only stepping out for a few minutes. Those memories didn't hurt anymore. They warmed me gently, like wrapping a shawl around my shoulders on a cool evening. Memories become softer with time, not because they fade, but because love grows around them like a cushion. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft orange and pink, I found myself sitting by the window. A cool breeze passed through the room, lifting a strand of my hair. I held his letter in my hands, folded, worn at the edges now, touched by my tears and my fingertips many times. I read the last lines again, slowly. "Please don't let my absence take away your future. Live. Smile. Remember me gently." I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. "I will," I whispered into the quiet room. "I promise you, I will." The breeze brushed my cheek, a soft, comforting touch, almost like a reply, almost like him.
Late at night, when the world was quiet and the moon was bright, I walked to the small balcony attached to our room. The sky stretched wide above me, dotted with stars. Some twinkled, some stayed steady. Some faded slowly behind a thin veil of clouds. I leaned against the railing and looked upward. Some say the people we love watch over us. Some say they become stars. Some say their love stays close, a quiet presence. I didn't know which was true, but I did know one thing. He was still with me. In my heartbeat, in my memories, in my quiet moments, in my strength, which grew a little more each day. Loss hadn't taken him away. It had simply changed the way I carried him. Before going back inside, I whispered to the night sky, "Thank you for loving me the way you did. Thank you for protecting me, even when it hurt you. And thank you for leaving me with enough love to keep going." My voice trembled, but it didn't break. A soft calmness settled in my chest. A calmness I hadn't felt in a long time. I finally understood something important. He had not left me with emptiness. He had left me with love. And love is not something that ends. It grows. It softens. It guides. It becomes the quiet strength that helps us take the next step. And the next. And the next. As I walked back to the bedroom, I paused at the doorway and whispered, "I'll be okay." It wasn't a promise to the world. It wasn't something I said to convince myself. It was a gentle truth, one that had slowly grown inside me, like a seed planted in the earliest days of grief. One day at a time, one breath at a time, one memory at a time. I would be okay. Not because I stopped missing him. Not because the pain vanished. Not because life went back to what it was. But because love had given me enough strength to keep going. I turned off the light, walked to the bed, and sat down softly. I placed his letter in the drawer beside me. Not hidden, not forgotten. Just resting. Like a gentle touch I could return to whenever I needed. I lay down, closed my eyes, and let the quiet fill the room. And before sleep came, I whispered, "I will remember you with more smiles than tears." And I knew, deep in my heart, that someday soon, that would become true.